So have you ever tried to automate a web page and Selenium just couldn't find the element, even though it was right there? Chances are the issue wasn't with Selenium. It was with how you were locating elements. In this video from Learn with Psudo, we are kicking off our locator strategy series, starting with 4 basic and reliable locators: ID, name, class name, and tag name. These might seem simple, but trust me, getting this right makes everything else smoother. So, what are locator strategies? When you're using Selenium, you are basically telling the browser, hey, go and find this element and interact with it. So, to do that, you need a locator strategy, which is nothing but a way to point Selenium to a specific element that you want. Think of it as giving an address or a map to Selenium. Without it, the Selenium is lost. It doesn't know how to interact with the elements or which element it has to approach. So you are going to tell your Selenium that, hey, this is a property, you are going to use this property and identify an object which has this property, and you're going to interact with it. For today, we'll talk about the first 4 strategies and then we'll move on to the later that we see in the slide. IDs, the ID locator is the king of locators. If you have ID, you can go ahead and use this. The challenge here is not all the elements will have ID, right? So let's take example on all of these locators and we'll talk about them as we go forward. All right, so my PyCharm is up here. So basically what I have done here is I have segregated the example sections for each of the type that we'll be discussing. I have written down what are the pros and what is a hypothetical area where you are going to use those locators. First, we are going to talk about ID. So ID are the most reliable, like we discussed. They are fast, unique, and very stable. And these are generally programmed in your application or the HTML page. But the challenge here is not all of the elements will have ID. Okay, some IDs are generally generated while the page loads. Okay, if you consider banking applications, most of the fields are tagged with a dynamic ID which gets created while the page is rendered or while the application is loading. They are usually tagged with a session ID which will vary each time you load the page or each time you log into the application. So how are you going to identify those particular objects? So let's get started with ID. My first thing is I am going to reuse the same code that I had written here to open my application, right? So let's go to my locators and I am going to reuse the same header and import statement. Now this line number 13 that we had written earlier, I am reiterating, this is to not close my browser after my execution is done. What URL am I going to hit? I'm going to hit my examples. So let's first open the application and then we'll see which element we want to capture. This is the page that I'm going to target and say I want to fill in the first name. All right. How do I inspect this? I come here, right click, inspect, or you can use F12 to open this and click on this button right here and point to this particular field. So click on this, point to this particular field, it gets highlighted. If you see here, we have an ID which is already declared as first name. I'm going to use this. Okay. I'm going to go back to my Selenium script. I'll say driver dot find elements and I'll say by ID and my ID is first name. All right. And what do I want to do in my first name? I'm going to write something in this text box. I'm going to store it in a variable called first name is equals to this. And I'll say first name dot what I'll do, send keys. And what name I want, I'll say Psudo. Okay. So what this will do, this will go to my page, write Psudo in my first name field. Similarly, if I want to do it for my last name field, how do I do? I again come here, click on this, inspect this element. It highlights this element for me. If I go here, copy the last name, which was my ID, and I am going to write similar thing. I'll say last name is equals to driver dot find element with last name. You'll say last name dot send keys. I'll say QA. Let's run this. My application is open, it wrote sudo and it wrote QA in the next field. So pretty simple and neat, right? You don't. So IDs are the most fast and the most reliable ones. Okay, but be aware, not all elements will have ID, and sometimes they are dynamically generated. So be careful while you are using an ID. Do some sanity runs and then try to commit your code. All right, moving on. The next we are going to see is name. So names are very commonly found in forms and use names only when there is no ID present. It is very commonly used in most of the forms, the sign up page, register page, or login page, even forgot password. So these pages usually use forms and they will have a ID and name tag to it. And also, if there are multiple elements with the same name, Selenium will only pick the first one. If you are going to use find elements, then you are going to get a list of all the elements. Let's take an example on how we can use name. I'll inspect this. In the email address, it says name as email. So I'm going to use the name parameter and I'll say driver dot find element by dot name, and the value that I want is email. I don't want to click it, but I'm just going to say directly send keys. Okay. And in my email, I'll just write my email. I'll say learn with psudo@gmail.com. And if I run this, it is going to fill in the field first name, last name, and the email as well. So it filled all the three fields here, right? This works well when ID is not present, but make sure the name is unique throughout the page, or else you will mess up your script. Moving on to the next one, we have class locator. So class name are also very useful in locating your elements, but it has some limitations. At times we have application where an element has multiple class, or the developer had designed it in such a way that it follows multiple class. Say a field has to be in all caps, so a different class is assigned to it. It should be a fixed field, a different class attached to it. It should have half of the application area covered, another class assigned to it. So in those scenarios, Selenium won't be able to identify a field using class name which has multiple classes tagged to it, because it expects only one class name. In those case, when you are going to give just one class name or the first class name, Selenium will identify the field. But if you are trying to paste the entire class name, Selenium will not be able to identify it. Okay. Now, to see an example on how we are going to use class name, let's go to our application. Okay, so for class, we are going to take a different example. So what are we going to do is we are going to capture all the field names on this page. So if you see here, there is a class called fields. And if you see here, there are division tags which contains the label and the field. Okay. So fields is the superset of field, and field is something which holds two web elements inside a division tag, right? Now here what I want to do is I want to get the text which is written here. I want to capture all of those text which has class name as fields. Okay. How do we do it? So we are going to use find elements here. Okay. What I'll do is I'll say field names is equals to driver.find elements, and I'll say by class name, and in this value I'm just going to specify fields. Okay, now I have all the fields. So what I just want to print the field names. Okay, so I'll say for field in field names, I'll say print field.text. Okay, because I want to print the text property, not the entire. So whatever is being returned here will be a list type, and it will have web element type data in it. So I just want the text property of that web element. I don't want the entire web element to be printed. Okay. So let's run this. So my application is opened. Everything fine. Okay. So here we have. So we have first name, last name, email address, password. So it's going to be aligned with my application. So it has first name, last name, email, password, date of birth, gender, and the values Gender has male, female, others, country, and it has other the values which country holds. So basically, it pulls everything from the application. So if you want to interact with individual elements, say based on the position, you can use a loop like this and you can interact with the web elements. So what we are going to do here is, I am just, oh, one second. So what we are going to do here is, let's say instead of just send keys, I'm first going to pull out what field I am trying to put into. Okay. So I'll just say this dot get attribute, and I'll say instead of class, I'll try to get what is the name of it. Okay. This entire thing I'll print. This is more like a debugging that I'm doing because I got an error and I'm trying to fix it just by identifying what field I'm trying to enter. Let's run this. All right. Now let's see. It says there is no name attached to it, right? The reason is inside these fields, it's just capturing these text. Okay. It's not considering other elements here because I only want a locator or a element which has fields name, I mean which has a class of name fields, and I am trying to capture that object in a web element or in a variable, and that variable, using that variable, I'm just trying to print what are the text inside it. Okay. So it's taking the entire thing inside it. So a best way to fill each of these fields are use the id and fill it individually. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to use this, but in the later videos I'm going to explain how we are going to use this whole hierarchy to find our exact element and how to populate those fields in a loop. And in the next one we have tag name. Okay. Now tag names are very rarely used locators, but this is actually helpful when you are pairing this up with some other locators. Also, one practical use of tag name would be where you want to find all the links in your text in your web page. Okay, so you just say find by tag name. So let's say I'll write here, I'll say driver dot find element, I'll say by dot tag name, and in this I'll just say a, which is my anchor tag, right? And in this I'll write, I'm not going to do anything, I'll again just try to print it. Okay. So I'll say links is equals to this, and I'll say link for link in links, link dot text find elements. So let's run this. So it's going to give me a list of all the links in my page. So it says learn with Psudo, menu, terms and condition, click here to log in. And then I have a LinkedIn link to it. So it is printed here, right? So these are the basic 4 tags that we have touch based. There's nothing very complex in it. It's all straightforward. You just have to give find by and your locators references, and then you have to give the actual reference of the locator. Okay. To wrap up, use id wherever possible. This is most reliable. Name is great for form fields. Use them only when id is not available. Be cautious with class name. Use it only if the class has single and unique values. Tag name is very generic one. Use them in very specific scenarios, like we did it to find all the links in my page. One thing I didn't explain about the class locator is when you are trying to use or you are trying to find an element using class name which has multiple classes assigned to it, right? So let's go back to our application. In here, say I have this field or let's say I have this division class that I'm going to select, right? So inside this, there are two classes. So I'm going to copy this entire class. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add these class names, or I'm just going to capture that field in a variable in my Selenium. So just for the sake of seeing whether it is able to capture or not. So I'll say driver dot find element, I'll say by class name, and I'll say this is my class name, and I'll just try to capture it. What's the value that I want here? Text field is equals to this. All right, let's run this, whether it is able to capture it or not. Opens the application, goes here, and it throws me an error, no such element exception, right? Why? Because like we had discussed, your class name cannot have multiple values in it. If you are going to use the field, the value field here, right? So it's only going to capture the first field reference in your text or in your application. So let's say I remove this half and it's just the field. Now in this one, I'm just going to write text field dot send keys learn with Psudo. Okay, just for the sake of seeing which field is being captured here. Now if we run this, what happens? It opens the application. It will find first name as the first locator, right? What happened here? It's again throwing an error. Element not interactable. Why? By class name field. Okay, so my field, my bad. So my field is again, when I say field, field is a division tag. I cannot enter a value directly in my division tag. So how do I handle this? I'll rename this field as div tag, and I'll say text field is equals to div tag dot find element by tag name input, and here I'll say text field dot send keys this, right? Let's run this. What do we get? Since it found the first, I had given a class reference of field, so it found the first occurrence of field class. It captured that division tag inside it, and inside that division tag I located my input field, and I filled that field with this particular send keys. Okay, it came here, it appended everything in the field, right? But say I don't want that. So before that, I'll have to say text field dot clear. So it will clear the field and it will enter the new text that I'm trying to enter here. So this time it entered just learn with Psudo at gmail.com. All right. All right. So this is just the part one. In the next video, we'll move on to the link based locator and link text, parallel link text as well. And that's all I wanted to have in this video. So if you found this helpful, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Learn with Psudo for more Selenium and Python content. Until then, keep learning. Bye-bye.